Hi, my name is Patty Latch and I am at the Schweitzer Library. We are celebrating Black History Month with a story called The Secret to Freedom by Marcia Vaughn, illustrated by Larry Johnson and published by Lee and Low Books. I have behind me a few of the quilts donated to us by a quilt guild, the Chattahoochee Evening Star Quilters, and they did storybook quilts. So I will show you later on the picture that they quilted out of this book, and then I'll show you how to make some yourself. So, The Secret to Freedom. I was 10 years old the first time I went to stay with my great Aunt Lucy. We'd shoo crows from the field, cool our feet in the river, and then sit in the kitchen chit-chatting like a pair of summer sparrows. I remembered one day we were shelling peas into a chipped blue bowl while the curtains billowed in the breeze beside us. Suddenly my gaze caught a splash of color on the wall. "Aunt Lucy," I said, "why do you keep that old scrap of cloth hanging over there?" Aunt Lucy split open a pod, chased the peas out with her thumb. "Child," she said, "that's a story I haven't told in a long, long time." When I was about your age, I was a slave, property of folks named Briggs down in South Carolina. Seeing I was born with a lame leg, the overseer said I was no good for field work. So I got sent to scrub clothes out in the hot sun till my hands were raw and my back ached like an old plow mule's. From where I worked, I'd look out across the plantation, trying to find Papa stooped over in the cotton fields. Sometimes I'd snatch a glance up at the big house, where Mama was a seamstress. Though I couldn't see my brother Albert, I'd hear the clang-bang of his hammer as he worked the blacksmith's anvil. Times were full of troubles. War was coming. Sure, folks up north were talking about putting an end to slavery. Folks down south bound to keep it. Long about that time, the overseer came to our quarters. "Bessie, Thomas," he said, "slave traders taking you to the auction block today." "What about Albert and Lucy?" Papa asked. "They're staying here," the overseer said. "Just you two getting sold off." Saddest thing I ever saw was my parents being led off to that wagon. I knew I'd never see Mama smile or hear Papa's laugh again. Master, he buy us, sell us, beat us, work us until we died. Oh, how I wished things would be different. Albert felt the same as me, and he came up with a plan. Whenever he was loaned out to work at another plantation, he'd find out all he could about the Underground Railroad. One time he came home with a burlap sack slung over his shoulder. "Lucy," he said, "I've got the secret to freedom inside this sack." Blacksmith over at the Mobley plantation gave it to me. Albert's eyes danced as he emptied the sack on the table. "What you got here, Albert," I said, "is a bundle of raggle-taggle old quilts." Albert chuckled. "No, Lucy, these quilts are special. Blacksmith told me each one has a secret message stitched right into it. Slaves who understand these messages have a better chance of escaping to freedom up north." "What kind of secret messages?" I asked. "Messages that tell folks what to do. When they see the quilt with the monkey wrench pattern, it tells folks to collect the tools they'll need when they run away. When folks see the one called the wagon wheel, it tells them that time's come to pack up their belongings. This quilt with the bear's paw says to follow the bear tracks north through the mountains." A wave of excitement washed over me. I was beginning to understand. "Is this one important?" I asked, pointing to a quilt of tumbling blocks. "It's the most important," Albert replied. "Tumbling blocks tell folks it's time to run." And then Albert's eyes got real serious. "You want to help slaves escape, Lucy?" he asked. "Of course I do," I said. "When the time's right, I'll tell you to hang a certain quilt on the fence by the road. Be sure to hang out the right one. Folks' lives will be depending on you." "What if Master Briggs sees it?" "Master, mistress, even the overseer won't pay no mind to some old slave quilt," Albert said. Slaves planning to escape will know what the message means. How will they know, I ask? 'Cause I'll tell them. That brother of mine was wily as a fox and brave as a bull. Things worked out just like Albert said when he told me I'd hang out the monkey wrench quilt on the fence. Later in the week, I'd hang out the wagon wheel quilt. A few days after that, the bear's paw one. Then, after I'd hang out the Tumbling Blocks quilt, Albert would steal away quiet as a cat during the night. He'd meet the runaways at the graveyard and lead them to a hiding place down by the river where they'd begin their journey to freedom. One night, I remember, the moon was riding low in the sky. Patrollers caught Albert coming back from the lake, coming back late without a pass. Time to teach you a lesson, they said. Those men tied Albert to a tree and lashed him hard till blood ran down his back. After that, the overseer took a mean dislike to Albert, whipped him raw for no reason, but those whippings couldn't beat the spirit out of my brother. Albert, I said one night, as I rubbed grease into his wounds, you've got to run. Albert shook his head. I ain't running, Lucy. I won't leave you. You've got to go, Albert. The overseer's just waiting for a chance to beat the life out of you. Albert rose to his feet. Then we'll both go, he said. You know I can't move no faster than a snail. I go, and the patrollers catch us for sure. Albert's face was stubborn. Then I'll carry you, Lucy, all the way to freedom. No, Albert, you've got to go without me. War will be coming soon. If the North wins, all slaves will be free. Albert held me in his arms and hugged me hard. Be a long time before I see you again, Lucy, he whispered. Tears hot as wash water flooded my eyes. I reached into my pocket. Take this with you, Albert, I said. It's a quilt square I stitched with the North Star on it. It'll bring you luck. Before I could say goodbye, he disappeared into the darkness. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Lightning flashed silver across the sky. I knew it was lighting the way for Albert, and then all was still. Suddenly the silence was shattered by the sound of old Butler barking as he charged off in the night. There was the crack of gunfire and angry shouts. Patrollers! Lord, I could barely breathe. I wanted to call out to Albert, but I couldn't. Couldn't do nothing except clutch my quilt tight and pray to keep from screaming. I had a horrible feeling I'd never see Albert again. Never knew if he got away that night or died trying, but my heart thundered like a drum to think, maybe, just maybe, he was on his way to freedom. War came, slavery died a slow death. Life was still hard, but I knew I wanted to learn to read and write and teach others to do the same. Took a heap of time learning all those letters and how to string them into words. I was all grown up by the time I started my own school in a brush arbor by the river. Didn't matter their age, anybody wanted to learn, I'd teach them. One especially hardworking pupil was a fellow named Chester. Every time he looked up at me, he'd get a grin wide as the watery river across his face. A year later, we got married. Chester worked as a sharecropper. I scrubbed clothes for a pittance and kept teaching for the love of it. One afternoon, the mailman came knocking at the door. Reckon this letter's been trying to find you for a long time, he said, handing me a rumpled brown envelope. Curious as a cat, I ripped it open. Out fell an old scrap of fabric with a single star stitched on it. Heavens above, it's from Albert, I cried. He made it. After all those years, I near burst with joy, knowing my brother was still alive. What's Albert got to say? Chester asked. My eyes raced across the paper. He's living up in Port Hope, Canada. Says if this letter ever finds me, he wants to bring his family to visit. Chester, I'm going to see my Albert. I'm going to hold him in my arms and hug him hard. Oh my, did we ever have a celebration when Albert and his family came to town. In all my years, that's the happiest thing that's ever happened to me. Great Aunt Lucy smiled as she took that old quilt square off the wall and held it in her hands. And then she carried it to the table and let me hold it too. Now I do declare, child, your eyes sparkle just like Albert's did all those years ago, she said. Then we sat in happy silence, shelling peas into the bowl while the curtains billowed in the breeze beside us. There's interesting information about the quilts at the end of the story. I think you will really enjoy. And then I wanted to encourage you to make your own quilts. Now, some people can sew and some of us really can't. So it's fun to invent quilts with things that we have at home. Now, the folks in the story would make quilts from things that they had. They didn't go to the store and buy new fabric or that sort of thing. So we're using things that we have. Here at the library, we had some old wrapping paper, some old scrapbooking paper, some old magazine papers, a glue stick, and some scissors. This is one square that might be on the quilt. This is, remember the monkey wrench quilting square that she talked about? This is a monkey wrench pattern. And then you can make all sorts of different patterns and glue them all together and make a whole big or just a little tiny quilt out of paper. And just, you can invent stories about your family to build into your quilt. So have a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing you at the library sometime. Thank you so much. Bye.